Hi, hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Creative Diaries. My name is Lillian. Thank you for being here wherever you are located in space and time. I'm happy to be connecting with you on the other side. And if you are new here, welcome. This is a podcast where I come on and I share about my own creative process, my own healing journey, where I am in my own self-development. And I also, along with sharing my personal experience, I also share things that I know and have learned through somatic studies and embodiment. I am a somatic movement educator and therapist. I work with folks and with groups of people in connecting to their bodies and connecting to their living bodies, their lived experience from within. So, this is often how I orient myself and also my reflection and what I share on this podcast is getting really curious about the lived experience and what it's like to be alive in this body, in this creative process that is our body and is our lives. Um, it's also a very personal journey for me in learning how to become and be more of myself as I am sharing and expressing. So, my journey is very much rooted in authenticity and the inquiry of authenticity. Like, what is it? What does it feel like to be me? What does it mean to be mean, to be me? And how can I stay connected to my internal sense as I move through the world, as I move through my relationships, and as I express myself? So these are sort of the main intentions of this podcast. I haven't yet sort of created a specific elevator pitch for it. So maybe this is me stumbling through it and creating it as I go. So this is what you can expect as you tune into my creative diaries. I chose the title Creative Diaries first and foremost because I knew that I wanted to express myself in some way. And I didn't know in what way. I was getting kind of stuck in, what's the modality? What's the intention? And I realized, and this was some inspiration that I got from reading Rick Rubin and how he speaks about being an artist and expressing ourselves is just rooting into creating what we like, and that our art is like a diary entry. It's honest and it's our own and it's subjective. And the way that he was speaking about this relationship between, or he was creating a metaphor of our art being our diary. And I remember the moment it clicked for me. I almost took what he said so literally because I was like, oh, I know how to do a diary. I've been keeping a diary pretty much my whole life. Ever since I was 12 years old, I kept a diary. I know how to write a diary entry. I know how to express sort of in the format of a diary. And this just unlocked something for me. It really helped me release any sort of perfectionism, fear. And actually, release isn't the right word for it. It's actually more so being able to hold those parts of me that come up, the perfectionism, the fear, the anxiety when it comes to my self expression. It helps me hold that with greater compassion for myself. And then I keep reminding myself, like, oh, this is. This is my diary. This is my diary. This is my diary entry. There there's no way that it could be wrong or it can be bad, right? So the way that I orient to these episodes is holding that intention for myself in my mind as I attempt to share with you and to be present with you, and to be received and perceived by you, right? So all of that sensitivity that comes up, I'm holding with a lot of tenderness and care. what else? That was sort of like a long intro. If you're new here, this is also once a month I release an episode that is public for anyone to tune into. And this is this episode right here. And then about once a week, I hop on and I do my diary entry, my creative diary entry, and I put it behind a paywall. And there's a few intentions for me right now with that. One is just creating some kind of sense of safety for myself, a smaller container, right? Because not everyone is going to be a paid subscriber. So it's a smaller container, a smaller community that I feel more comfortable being able to share myself, right? I also love intimate containers. I'm actually I'm creating my business around small intimate containers. I've been thinking a lot about that, working with groups in a small, contained, intimate way. So that's another intention that I have for the paywall of some of these episodes. And then also just to receive the practice of receiving, right? The practice of receiving what you might want to give monetarily to um, for you to receive my expression, and then for me to be able to receive your gesture of listening, your gesture of support, this gesture of that symbolizes a sense of value for what I have to share. And so this is very much a practice of exchange for me, of being able to receive. As anyone out there knows, as an artist or an entrepreneur, or just like a sensitive human being in the world, receiving, practicing receiving can be a really vulnerable thing. So, this is another one of my intentions. So, if you want to hop on into this sort of smaller, contained community, I would be so excited to have you. Join for it's $5 a month for the paid subscription. And then if you're tuning in once a month, also, hi, hello, welcome. Here you get a more sort of, yeah, like broad perspective of what I've been diving into. The other loose announcement that I have that I wanted to share before I dive into some topics here is that this upcoming winter, starting February 9th, I will be running a virtual creative healing container. And this will be a small, intimate group experience where we will be exploring this this thing that I'm exploring, which is authenticity and creative expression and holding with a lot of awareness, compassion, tenderness, the parts of ourselves that might come up when we are expressing ourselves, any shame, fear, anxiety, perfectionism, all of this stuff that kind of feels like gets in our way. And this group is very much intended to be with that and learn how to come into relationship with the things that get into our way and see what happens when we bring a little awareness and compassion to that, see how this energy can alchemize and see how we can move through these. I don't want to call them blocks, but move through, learn from these obstacles. So the group is not about creating art. It's not about producing anything. It is about creative process, and it is about the creative process pretty much being the same thing as a healing process, right? Healing is creative and creativity is healing, right? So it's working with that exchange of energy, keeping that energy, the life force energy circulating within us so that we can move forward and into our lives and create more, to be more of ourselves, to manifest what we have on our heart to manifest. And what I'm excited about this being a group container is that we are all mirrors for one another. I don't know if you've ever experienced being in a group class, group container, and it's just so miraculous. Like there is something magical about gathering, intentional gatherings, because there always seems to emerge some kind of thread commonality, common humanity between the people in the group. And so it's very much an energy exchange, and some really beautiful mirroring can happen where, you meet someone for the first time and you have very different lives, but for some reason, you're experiencing the same feelings or the same types of suffering or the same inspirations. You're learning the same thing, right? So we have all of these lives, and then somehow magically, some of us will end up on the same road, same road at the same time. And we're like, hey, how'd you get here? I don't even know how I got here. What's going on here in this dimension? Anyway, I digress. So if you want to join, there's still some time to join. Right now, I have about 3 people confirmed. I hope to cap it off at around 7 people. Um, so yeah, that's where I'm at right now with it, with that process of gathering participants. So if you want to be one of those people, we have about a week and a half. Yeah, two weeks, a week and a half. Oh my gosh, I don't even know where I am in time to sign up. So it's not too late. Reach out to me if you have any questions. I'm happy to give you all of the info about that. So, okay, where am I now? I did come with some notes. As some of you know, if you've been listening, I usually come pretty much unprepared but inspired. It's kind of how I'm operating these days, off of the energy of inspiration, but trying to have some kind of containment to hold me in. So I did take some notes. My first note is insecurity, fear. Is there something you're avoiding? Take the risk. So, my last 2 episodes, I actually spoke about perfectionism and insecurity that I was experiencing, and that I do experience, that there's these waves that I experience where, it's the highs and lows of life. It's the highs and lows of our mood and temperament. For me, sometimes it'll feel like a great fog, just a great fog will come in. And, there's many causes and correlations and reasons for this that actually don't feel like they matter so much. What matters more to me is just this awareness of when the fog starts to roll through. And when I experience this low, then there are other times I experience this high, and I try to hold on to that feeling, and then inevitably I come back down, right? So there's these waves. Um, that is, I believe, is natural to the human experience. Some of us are more wavy than others. There's always a part of me that's like, I wonder what it'd be like to be like steady, to be more of that earth element that's just like slow and steady. That's very much a contrasting or opposite energy of my own. However, I do believe it is the human experience to have emotions and to have ups and downs, and for one day things to feel like they're working out, and for the next day things to feel like everything is falling apart. It's just part of the human condition. So I hold all of that within myself with a lot of grace and compassion. And so I've been sort of investigating, like, as I've been in this low point, I have been able to get curious about, like, what's going on here? Where is this coming from? Or what do I do with this? Or what do I not do with this, right? How can I be with this fog? And I'm sort of contradicting what I said in the last episode. The last episode, I was speaking a little bit more towards um, more gentleness, actually, a more gentle perspective, where it's like, when, if you're ever feeling like you're taken over by fear, anxiety, insecurity, right? Those times that you feel really small or stuck, like you can't move forward. A really useful thing you can do is to let yourself slow down and not expect so much from yourself, right? So the things that you were quote unquote accomplishing one day might feel too big to continue doing the next day, right? And so I think there is an element of just listening and being with where you are and then tending to whatever next step feels safe and feels good, right? And so sometimes we need to take smaller steps and also smaller risks. And this is something that I want to talk about is the risk factor. Usually when there's fear, or there's stuckness, fear that's associated to being stuck, um, it's because there's something really vulnerable that's happening underneath. We're afraid of something, right? We're afraid of something. Like, what if I do take this step and I fail, or I get hurt, or it doesn't turn out the way that I want it to turn out, right? So there's this vulnerability underneath the fear. And and so in order to move forward, it really is about being on that edge of discomfort. And it might always, this is what I'm learning or playing with in my own perception, is just accepting that maybe there's always going to be a little sense of discomfort if I'm wanting to move forward through fear, right? Um, yeah, I think there's some phrase that's like, growth is on the other side of fear. I don't know. Okay, now I'm butchering that. but basically you might have heard this, right? Like living on your edge, the edge of discomfort. And so really it's about kind of like growing that capacity also to be with that discomfort that risk requires, right? And we can take risks that also at the same time feel safe, right? Like safe enough. When I say risk, I don't mean negligence or mindlessness. When I say risk, I mean moving forward even when there's fear. And we can still be really mindful and intentional with how we do this. Um, and what might feel like a risk to us might not look like anything to anyone else. Like from the outside eye, it doesn't have to look like anything. Sometimes it feels like a bit of a risk to even just get out of bed in the morning, to step outside and go to a coffee shop, right? So what feels vulnerable and tender internally is very subjective, right? And only you know how much forward movement is enough. Okay, so there's all that. And then I'm going to say something that like maybe contradicts that, but I think it's related, and maybe I'll make this connection as I continue to speak. Um, the contradiction is also saying like actually like sometimes for myself when I am starting to feel stuck and insecure, it's usually I've noticed it's usually when I'm procrastinating on something, when I'm avoiding doing something, and often with the avoidance, there's a lack of awareness. So I won't even notice that I'm avoiding this thing that I'm avoiding. It's just this thing I've avoided. It's in the back of my subconscious mind and it's growing into this like spooky, shadowy monster in the back corner of my subconscious mind. And I'll wake up one day and I'm like, God, why do I feel so horrible? Why do I feel depressed? Why do I feel so heavy in my body? It's like, oh yeah, because there's like a spooky monster that's just like looming in the back corner of my mind, like waiting for me to give attention to it. And I guess this metaphor I'm using, like the spooky monster, is the fear, right? It's the fear, whatever the fear is, that I'm avoiding. And so with this, I find that like just by taking some space and having that time to pause, right? Pause any sort of doing that I'm doing, right? Just taking a moment from my day or even a weekend to just like rest, right? Let myself rest, let myself um, be as I am, and then create a little bit of space so I can get curious about what what is going on in my subconscious mind. And even just asking the question, is there something that I'm avoiding? And and then even just growing that awareness, like sometimes the answer will come to me quite quickly, like I can feel it. I'm like, oh, there's this task, there's this thing that I want to do, but it's causing me fear and anxiety. And often for me, when I do that thing that I've been avoiding, that I've been afraid of, all of a sudden, whew, my life force energy has come back. The fog clears. I get a burst of energy. It's like I can move again. It's like it's being able to circulate the energy through my body, right? This is where, like, if you can imagine stuck energy or stuckness, or some people call this a block, right? When you imagine taking action with the thing that you're afraid of, it really allows the circulation to start to complete itself, right? The circulation of energy can now move through the body. And that's what our energy wants to do. Our energy is in constant movement. It's in constant movement. Energy is not created or destroyed. I really love this phrase and I love remembering this. It also debunks the whole stuck thing, right? Like feeling like, oh, I'm stuck or I'm blocked or I have this obstacle and I need to get rid of this block, get rid of the obstacle. I find that it's less about getting rid of this thing and more about moving it, moving, moving it, moving the energy. Um, and sometimes moving the energy can be direct or indirect, right? And what I'm speaking to is a direct thing, right? Like I'm aware that there's something that I'm afraid of. I'm afraid of taking action on. And then me doing that specific thing helps me move that energy. That's a direct way that I can come into relationship with whatever the stuckness is that I'm feeling. There's also indirect ways um, because we are whole. Energy is constantly circulating within us and outside of us. I always think about like Chinese medicine or just yeah, like any sort of uh holistic healing model of the body, right? It's like you might have a pain in your shoulder, but then if you press a certain acupuncture on your foot, then your shoulder starts to heal, feels better, right? So that's an example of indirect, right? So it's like you might not go exactly to the point of pain or suffering. You don't necessarily go specifically to the block, but you work with the system of energy around it. And then that can be a way to start to circulate that energy again. I hope this is all making sense. I'm just kind of like going for it here. Um, okay, let me be more specific. Going back to working directly with the thing that we're afraid of and taking that risk and energy to flow. I noticed for myself recently that I've been dreaming of my next travel excursion. And I don't know if I'd say I was avoiding it or procrastinating. It was more so like I was in the ideation phase, the dreaming phase. Ooh, and maybe you'll relate to this because this kind of goes for any creative process or anything we want to move forward in life. It's like it always starts out as an idea. Everything starts in the darkness of our subconscious of an idea, this like invisible thing. And then if we actually really want it to manifest, like we do have to bring it from, we have to bring it from the ether realm into the earth realm. And to me, that's always been really hard. I am a dreamer through and through. I just learned in my astrology chart I have a Neptune complex, which I honestly don't know what that means, but when I heard that, I was like, yeah, that has to be that has to be true. Neptune is the energy of sort of, yeah, like dreaming, fantasy, sort of more in that ethereal space. So it's always been hard for me to kind of bring it down to earth because in order to bring anything down to earth, it has to come into our bodies, right? Like action has to be taken. It has to come into this physical form. And in the physical form, we feel it, right? We feel it because it's moving through our bodies. To take action on something, we have to feel that. And that can be really scary and difficult or just or just unfamiliar, right? And so yeah, I've been sort of dreaming and ideating on this trip and I've been speaking it out loud. I've kind of been joking with the people in my life. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to go to Mazunte, Mexico, and I have this plan and I'm speaking it as if it has already happened. And then inevitably, time is ticking, time is moving forward. And I was like, wow, if if I want this to be true and real, I now have to take action on it. And then that's when I started to feel all this like, like, oh my God. Um, I love to travel and I I love to travel for so many reasons. And one of the reasons is because it really challenges me to have more confidence in my decision-making skills. Not just decisions for decision's sake, but like making decisions based off of what I want and what lights me up and makes me feel alive. And yeah, and this manifestation piece is like actually learning to take action because the idea and the fantasy of it is always going to be different than the actual lived experience, right? So it's like, of course, I'm like dreaming about drinking a margarita on the beaches of Mazunte and all of, it's like beautiful and then now I'm like, oh, I have to actually do something. And now I'm on Google Flights. I'm on like a 5 hour rabbit hole looking at all of the different flight options, looking into, like how I can enter into the country, what the rules and regulations are, looking into how much everything is going to cost, looking into, yeah, the various flights and also lodging options and doing the budgeting. And it's like, do you feel how different that energy is? Now, some of you out there, like, you might love this shit. Some people are really like, yeah, let me like do the planning. Let me get my spreadsheet out. Let me like put pen to paper. For me, this is very uncomfortable. Um, and I can get into a flow of it, but often it just creates a lot of anxiety because there's a lot of decision fatigue. It's like, oh my God, there's so many factors, and then there's so many factors, and I'm on Google Flights and I'm on Airbnb, and I'm literally like cross-correlating all these data points and getting so myopic about everything that it's like, okay, am I trying to save time? Am I trying to save money? Like, and then I'm like, am I in a scarcity mindset? What if I just like spend all my money? It's like, and I'm like trying to find some kind of line that feels balanced for me and authentic to me. And it's just like a lot of information to take in. Um, anyway, all to say, I kind of don't know where I'm going with this, other than just sharing with you my experience. That like, yeah, the fantasy of me laying on the beach in Mazunte drinking a margarita is very different energy than me trying to budget my trip and all of the details around that. And I spent all day yesterday in front of my computer, and there were moments where I was like, I need to pull myself away. Because then there's also this addictive part where it's like I'll hook on to the task, I'll hook on to I guess the analysis paralysis of it, where I'm just like data gathering and it's like I can't stop. I cannot stop scrolling on Airbnb. and, and my body is starting to get dysregulated. And I'm like, I really need to lay down on my back or take a walk outside. So I'm noticing all of this. I'm being with all of this. And um yeah, and last night I finally did. I did the first step at least, which was to purchase my plane ticket from New York to Mazunte. And even in just that one transaction, that one transaction took so much of my attention and energy and also brought up a lot of fear, a lot of fear. And I noticed my mind going through all of these things that were trying to like sabotage the plan. Total sabotaging the plan. Let me try to think about what these thoughts were. A lot of it was money, right? Like trying to budget and, feeling like, oh, I don't know if I have enough for this, or what if I have enough now, but what about later in the year? I don't, I don't really have consistent income sources or I'm trying to make calculations that I don't even have the information to yet. And so then there's all this anxiety of like, what if I make this choice with this investment right now and it's going to have a negative impact later, right? So that was a fear that came to my mind. Um, and then fears like, just like fears. Um, what if the plane goes down? um, what if I don't have any internet while I'm there and it affects my work? Um, what if there's a tarantula in my room? What if there's a scorpion in my room? What do I do about scorpions? What if I get bit by a scorpion? What if I get sick while I'm there? Right? So, like all of these fears, very common travel fears, travel anxiety. And yeah, that was all going through my mind as I was doing all of this. And then I bought the plane ticket. I went to sleep. I was like, Lillian, this is enough. Enough is enough. Just go to bed. And it wasn't until this morning I was taking a shower and I had a moment where I was like, whoa, like remembering all of those thoughts. And I was like, wow, isn't it amazing? Isn't it amazing how we humans are wired to keep ourselves safe, right? To keep ourselves safe. And if we are to do anything outside of what we've our learned conditioning around what safety feels like to us, then it's literally part of our mind. Our mind's job is to tell us everything that's going to go wrong. And sometimes this happens in forms of thoughts. Sometimes it's just a feeling, right? It's like, oh, this is too much. You start to feel fear in your body. Um, and yeah, I was just having almost this moment of appreciation and detachment too, detachment, where I was like, oh, my mind was just doing its job. My mind was doing its job. And so it makes me think about this process just as a whole, right? Like this is my story about buying a plane ticket, but this can go for anything in our lives that we want to move forward with, right? Our dreams and desires, right? These projects that we have that we want to manifest, the things that we want for our lives. And what that requires is taking that step forward, even when there's fear present, right? And so this sort of brings me to my next thread that I wanted to talk about, where, if you're following, what do I call this? Like in the wellness world or, um, yeah, psychology world, when we're talking about the nervous system, often what you'll see more so on the internet, internet spaces, um, is how to regulate our nervous system, right? We hear a lot about nervous system regulation. And this nervous system regulation, the intention or the objective is often to soothe ourselves when we are dysregulated, right? When we've passed our threshold when we've passed our window of tolerance, is a term for it. When we're outside of our window of tolerance and we start to feel dysregulated, these nervous system regulation tools are helpful to be able to come back to baseline. And these tools are often self-soothing mechanisms, right? And what I've been thinking about and working with for myself and also with my clients, people that I work with, is that yes, these tools are really important. It's actually like the first step. It's the first step of reparenting ourselves, right? Because often, we get dysregulated because we never quite learned how to soothe ourselves, right? And so we go into more of these defense patterns, whether they're conscious or unconscious, right? We might get stuck um, in fight, flight, freeze, fawn. And we might not even know that we're stuck because it's just what's normal to us. And also, when we do notice, often we are outside of our window of tolerance and we need to come back to some kind of baseline, right? And this is all really imperative stuff in learning how to take care of ourselves and connect with ourselves, right? It's a tool for awareness as well, right? We need to gain awareness of how we're feeling in order to tend to soothing ourselves, in order to come back to some sort of balanced baseline. Now, that's sort of like the first step. The second step that we don't often investigate, in my personal opinion, that we don't investigate sort of enough um, in these dialogues about nervous system regulation. The next step would be actually to be able to grow capacity to tolerate new sensations and also to grow the capacity to hold more intense sensations, right? Because often when we're dysregulated, when we're outside of our window of tolerance, it's because there's something that's happening that we can't hold, whether it's fear, anxiety, um, you know, I mean, that's probably some of the main roots there, among others, but that there's something in us that we can't quite hold. And so, first, we learn how to soothe, and first, we learn how to connect with ourselves. And through that connection, we start to learn how to feel, right? We start to fine tune our ability to feel sensation. And with that attunement and the feeling sensation, we're teaching ourselves to be able to remain present within a sensation and a feeling before we XYZ, before we go into dysregulation, before we go into our habitual defense mechanisms, right? Before we dissociate, before we go to our addictions, before we react, right? So it's all about growing the capacity to have enough awareness to be able to be with the feeling a little bit longer. And this is how you step through fear. I mean, this is like what we hear often in the self-development spaces, right? Where it's like if we want to move forward with these dreams that we have on our heart, if we want to be able to change our lives in a way that feels like we're coming into more alignment with who we are and who we want to be, it's like we have to move through fear. So the question is how? How do I do that? You can't really move through fear if anytime you feel any kind of fear, you go to self-soothing. This is what I'm trying to say. like I said, that's sort of the first step. But self-soothing is not meant to be a mechanism to shut down the feeling. It's how can I soothe this feeling to be able to stay present with it and then be able to be with the feeling for longer so that I can learn how to move through, take action, even when the feeling is present. I hope this is making sense. And I'm reflecting now, I'm really grateful for my experience as a performer in my life because I learned how to do this. I learned how to do this in sports. I grew up doing gymnastics, which is I mean, it's a performance. You're up there doing your routine, very high pressure. Judges are judging you, your team is watching you. Um, yeah, that type of performance. And then also I moved into the world of dance and now some theater, stuff like that. And what I somehow learned at a young age, um, was being with that feeling of stage fright. It was so intense. And it's funny, I'm a little bit out of practice. There was a time that I was performing a lot and I was just like on it. I was on it. And it wasn't that I didn't have fear or I didn't have stage fright. It's that I just knew how to be with the feeling. And now it's funny, it's like I don't perform as much anymore. And so now that I feel almost a little bit out of practice. But if I can recall the times that I was, really kind of in that practice, I mean, if I can paint a picture for you, it's like I'm backstage. I can hear and sense the audience out there. The lights are low. The lights on the stage are hot and bright. I'm in my costume, whatever. And I would start to feel my heart beating really, really fast. And I would also have to pee. I always had to like pee my pants. I'd pee like 10 times before going on stage. And then inevitably it was like, okay, I don't have time for another trip to the bathroom. But right, like my heart would start beating fast, my stomach would flip or feel kind of sick, or butterflies would be in my stomach. And there were a few ways that I dealt with this. One of my favorites was I would close my eyes and I would take my feet a little bit wider than my hips and I would go up onto releve, which is balancing on the balls of my feet. My heels are lifted off the ground. And so I'm balancing on my legs. My eyes are closed and I would imagine the image of a tree, specifically an evergreen tree. Sometimes the image would also be a diamond, right? So it was like my whole body was making this diamond shape. And I would imagine either the diamond um, in my third eye center, or I would imagine the diamond right outside of me as if I was projecting an image of a diamond or projecting an image of the evergreen tree. And I would let myself balance and stay there with my eyes closed. And that would activate my system to really, really be present. There's no way I could think about everything that was going to go wrong if I was trying to maintain my balance in this way. Another thing I would do is just stay warm in my body. I mean, that was imperative anyway for me to like execute whatever performance I was about ready to do. But like push-ups, squat jumps, shaking is really, really good. And so, yeah, I'm grateful I learned these ways to be with moments of like really intense fear that I felt so physically in my body. Because I know the experience of having this fear and then needing to continue to move, right? Continue to move my body. And I hope through my story, you're also, creating some relevancy for yourself. But it reminds me of like, it's just the basics of taking action with fear present, right? Being able to um, hold and tolerate that feeling a little bit more without getting stuck, without getting frozen. Yeah. And often it's like quite literal too. Like even if you're not, about ready to go on stage and perform, but let's say you're about ready to go into a meeting, or let's say you want to send an email that feels like risky to send, or let's say you want to pay for that goddamn ticket to Mazunte, Mexico, and you start to feel that fear present, and then you go into all these reasons why you shouldn't go to the meeting, or you shouldn't send that email, or you shouldn't buy that plane ticket. That's your mind trying to maintain that sense of familiarity and safety. So if in those moments you can literally like get up, shake your body, uh, place your hands on your chest, or anything. It can be quite literal. It's like get your body moving. Like feel what it's like to keep moving with that fear, and then you'll find that doing whatever thing you want to do all of a sudden becomes a little bit more accessible and a little bit easier. What else? Hmm. I mean, that's the end of that thought. And also, I have nothing left on my notes, but I'm going to take a little pause for myself to see if anything else sort of wants to come through. Maybe just tying this all up again by reiterating energy is never created nor destroyed, and all life is movement. If you're alive and you're here, you're moving. And in that sense, sort of the more ultimate truth perspective is that there's no such thing as being stuck, or there's no such thing as an obstacle, quote unquote, being in your way or having a block. It's simply energy that has created a pattern. It's energy that's created a pattern, and it's looping in that pattern. So if you think of it in this way, and that it's movement and energy, you can get curious and creative about what other types of actions will interrupt the pattern so that the energy can flow in a different direction. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. So I'm only a few clicks away. Let me know if anything in this episode landed for you. Reach out just to say hello. I love to know who's listening on the other side. I love to be in connection and in community with you all. If you're interested in the creative healing group, let me know. If you would like to give a gesture of connection to me by paying for the subscription of the podcast, I would be so happy to receive that. It's $5 a month. And yeah, I won't be leaving for Mexico for a while until the end of February, but I'll continue my episodes then. And so I hope you'll follow along this journey with me as I prepare to leave my nest once again. And yeah, I just want to thank you for being here on the other side. Okay, until next time, be well.